They're a tool, the zeros and ones, right? So the question is really who, if not us? And maybe you're going to remember the name on the next slide. You can tell that Colin and I have been working together for a while, because this quote is also by Grady Booch. And he said, every line of code represents a moral and ethical implication, and that is an answer to the question of sustainability impact. Why do I care? I know you care because that's the theme of the overall day, and that's what brought you here. And that's why all software developers can and shall care, because we care. We have a responsibility for the systems that we put out there, and we embed our values into the systems that we design. I love this picture of Grady Booch because he looks like the godfather of software architecture, which he is. You may also know him as one of the fathers of UML. And these days, he looks very much into what does it look like, us humans being responsible for the software that we put out there. Now, your next question on this might be, well, what are sustainability impacts actually? And there's been a bunch of work on that in the past. One of the fathers of that field is Lorenz Hilty, the guy who's in the left in that picture, and on the right is his colleague Bernd Erbicher. They're both at ETH in Zurich. And about 10 years ago, they brought out this piece of work that looks at the impacts of software, of IT in general, as part of the problem and as part of the solution. And they classified that into 3 orders of effect. The direct impacts, mainly lifecycle impacts, then the indirect impacts, as in what effects does a software system or an IT system have on the behavior of their user. And on the positive side, we see there are induction effects and obsolescence effects. All of a sudden, we don't need to buy some physical goods because we can access them as virtual services. And on the negative effect, sorry, I switched them around, substitution effects, those are the ones that where we have to buy less physical goods. And then the obsolescence effects, or the downside of that, all of a sudden I have some devices that got outdated fairly quickly. And on the third level, the systemic effects, that means what happens if I use these systems over a long period of time? What happens in the operational environment and in the societal environment? And here on the negative side, we see rebound effects. So instead of using less energy and less technological devices that are more capable over time, we see an increase of those devices. And on the bright side, we also see a transition towards more sustainable consumption patterns. So all of these environmental impacts. Is that everything? No, because otherwise that slide wouldn't exist. So let's look at one example software system, the design of Airbnb, which you may be familiar with. And in the beginning, the idea was, let's make homes available to people for renting them more cheaply during a vacation. And it's going to feel local, it's going to be nice, it's a nice additional income for somebody. Great ideas so far. They missed a couple of things. So what they didn't expect, and what we didn't see coming, was in a lot of major cities, the median rental prices increased quite a bit because people thought, oh, it's a great investment, I'm going to buy a second apartment and rent it out short term. A side effect of that is that in neighborhoods that were already prone to gentrification, some people couldn't afford their rents anymore, and so race separation increased. Examples for economic and social impacts. Is that everything? Still not quite. The last 20 years that you've been exposed to a lot of IT systems, just a few of those examples on the slides, how have they affected you and your kids and your parents and your friends and the way how you relate to other people? One of the people who looked into that type of effects is Tristan Harris, who founded the Center of Humane Tech. And some of the impacts that they have found are making sense of the world, attention and cognition, physical and mental health. Mental health has certainly been on the decline the past 2 years. Social relationships. So we see more disconnect, more loneliness than ever before, despite the fact that we feel we're more connected via tech all the time. Politics get influenced, elections get influenced, systemic oppression. We see different ways of racism coming up and sexism. And the next generations, our kids, very much grow up with tech infused in their daily lives, which also causes some developmental delays and has increased teen suicide rates. positive and negative in all of them. The big question is, if we go back to that Airbnb example, is there any way how we could have foreseen that? Now, that's the work that we've been working on for the past decade, and Colin is one of the collaborators on this. We looked into 5 main dimensions of sustainability and developed sets of questions that would help IT developers and other stakeholders, including people with more economic expertise, people with marketing expertise, to foresee those potential impacts. And we have a guiding process developed along with that that would walk you through capturing the effects and then finding the relationships in between those effects. And in the end, we recommend how you can mitigate the effects that you would label as negative and how we can support and make sure that the positive benefits happen. Do you have to hire us for that? No, you don't, because we developed some templates for you and you can get them for free. So the framework consists of this guiding process, then a number of templates. In fact, this comes in the form of a workbook that you can download from Zenodo. The slide has a link on the right-hand side. And in that, you find the sets of questions. You're going to walk through every step. You have a report template at the end. So at the end, that can be presented to management. And we give you a diagram that provides an easy overview of all the impacts that you have identified in your 2 to 4 hour brainstorming session, depending on how much your team can dedicate to this time. You don't even have to get the whole team around one table. You can also do individual dimensions at a time and interview the people that have the most input for those relevant dimensions. Let's take a look into that diagram. So you're going to recognize the 3 orders of effect in that radar chart coming from the inside to outwards, and the idea is for every dimension and for every order of effects to find at least one potential impact. And this is what we're going to do next, right? Because I got about an hour and 15 to do this with you. No, no. So we're going to look at an example that I did last year with master students here at Chalmers, and we brainstormed about 20 minutes on the system Twitter. Now, all the things you read here on the slides, they are not quantified, and they are our hypotheses and our extrapolations. And you can see that there is a lot of connections also across dimensions and across orders of effect. And what we were really interested in are those lines, those orders, chains of impact. That's what I was looking for, the chains of effects. So from sharing information, we can possibly influence politics over time and policies, and we can increase knowledge and education. On the other hand, there can also be negative effects, like from sharing information, it can go into witch hunts and mental distress. And we didn't color code the positive and negative impacts, because some of them could go one way or another. That would be one next step to develop the scenarios of which of those do we actually want to support and which of those do we want to mitigate and prevent that they won't happen. So far, so good. That's the general idea. How do we know that that works? We've tried it out across the globe. We've tried it in 7 universities across the globe, and we've tried it with several industry partners in different application domains, from information systems to embedded systems to hybrid systems, from Finland to India to California, different parts of the world. And because of work circumstances the past 2 years, we've also developed an online version of it. If you want to see this whole thing narrated, I have it up on YouTube. And here is the link again for downloading it from Zenodo. And no, I don't expect you to type this up. You can find it on my website, or you can email me and I'll send it to you. So the question is, why isn't everyone doing this? And yes, people have started finding it. We had an industry, we had a company recently approach us saying, hey, we found this thing of yours on the internet. Can we ask you a couple of questions about it? And we said, yes, sure. And we're really excited that people are using it. Why not everybody? Well, not everybody finds my stuff on the internet. That is one answer. Of course not. And why we're not systematically pursuing it everywhere yet is, until safety guidelines and fire hazard guidelines got developed, enough people had to get hurt to make that happen. The trouble with sustainability is some of that might slap us in the back because it's not a linear thing. The second piece is a lot of our economy is still based on planned obsolescence, for the sound reason of making more money, as this gentleman from the 50s states on the poster. In the end, the only way we can make this happen is that, as thoughtful citizens, we're going to contribute to changing the world. And the question is, if I sit in my office day after day and my email client looks like deadline, 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 where do we even start? So the second aspect of my talk is, how are the software developers doing in all this? And maybe you can relate to the scenario that the stick figure on the right-hand side is going through. I can certainly relate because I drew the comic. So writing yet another report, answering emails, updating some stuff, modifying some code, maintaining some code, wash, rinse, and repeat. Maybe your number of busy badges is as large as mine. In addition to that, over the last 2 years, we've had a lot of challenges around health, physical and mental. We've had changes in our work environments. We work from home and get really lonely, or can't even get a breath in without kids and pets running through our legs. Either way, we have changed our workspaces. Many of us have experienced a lot of online fatigue. Where does that leave us? On the physical side, on the medical side, and we'll see what the cardiologist says to that, we can certainly see effects on the nervous system. So this is the one medical slide that I have in the talk. On the right-hand side, you see the vagus nerve, which is one of the central players in our parasympathetic nervous system. And on the bottom right side, you see the adrenal glands sitting on the kidneys. Now, as we get exposed to stressful situations, we get adrenaline in the blood from the kidneys. At the brain barrier, that gets a different name. Now it's called epinephrine. And it goes to the amygdala and to the hippocampus, where it gets compared. And if we have a memory match of, is this classified as stress, as a threat, then we experience a fight, flight, or freeze response. Like me coming on stage and giving a talk, get all shaky inside. Yes, after 10 years, still. What else happens in your body? Now, if I go back and relax afterwards, I'm good, that stress response gets digested. But if we get exposed to prolonged stress, deadline after deadline, email after email, phone call after phone call, and do not get enough downtime, we ingrain those neuronal pathways of stress, 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 and then we get to unhealthy hormone levels, loss of memory, loss of sleep, decreased performance, risk of disease, premature aging, and so on. Expertise sitting over there in the previous speaker, Marcus. Now, what does that have to do with software engineering? Are you in the right conference, Missy? Yes, because do you have your best ideas under stress? I don't. Do you make less mistakes under stress? I don't. And do you make better decisions under stress? Not necessarily. There are people who are especially trained for that. I'm not one of them. Neither are most of the software developers. That was my doomsday slide. So, to the good news. We can change that situation. Our brains rewire constantly. And we can actively tone that vagus nerve, that central player within the parasympathetic nervous system. And that gets us to reduce the fight or flight response, which means if we have a high vagal nerve tone, we recover more quickly from stress. 2 benefits in that: short-term recovery and long-term resilience. To break that down a little further, if we train it, in the brain we will see increased concentration and cognition, increased creativity and productivity, and enhanced connection and communication. In the body, we will see better mood and greater resilience, further medical benefits in the fine print, and I know this is too small for you to read because we don't have time to go through all of that in detail. But it talks about the different organs and how it works positively on each one of them. I really want to get to the how. So, how do we train that vagus nerve? We breathe. But Birgit, that's what we've been doing all day. So we're good, right? Done. Coffee. Not quite yet, because most of the time we breathe too shallow and we don't breathe out all the way. And if we work in front of digital screens a lot, we spend a lot of time in our heads and not so much time in our bodies. How are your toes doing? You didn't remember you had them until right now, right? Because we spend a lot of time in our heads. So the solution are more specific respiratory techniques that help us reconnect. And this is the point where it gets really interesting for me on stage, because I want to invite you to a 1-minute experiment. I'm a researcher, I love self-experiments. So, with your permission, I would like to try out one breathing technique. You don't even have to get up. You can just relax. So lean back, close your eyes for a moment. I promise I'll still be there when you open them again. And then take a deep inhale with me. And then let it go like you just came back from work. And we'll do a few more of those. Sound effects are welcome, they make everything better. Inhale. We'll do about 5 more. 3 more. Really let your shoulders drop with the exhales. Last one. Good. Now, feel into your body. What has shifted since you started this? You can gently blink your eyes open again. Science shows this is the quickest proven way to relax your nervous system. You may realize that, oh, it became a little lighter around the chest. Everything loosened up a bit. I feel a bit more clear. I feel a bit more relaxed. Whichever your flavor of it is, you're welcome. And this was just a tiny taster, because usually we do this breathing technique, the sitting one for about 10 minutes and the laying down for about 20. Could you imagine that to be useful? The being more relaxed and getting back in the body? I think so, so I designed a research study around that. And in 3 runs of that research study, last one is currently running. We're in session 7 that I'm going to facilitate tonight. We collected survey data from participants around mindful attention awareness, positive and negative experiences. All the fancy abbreviations here on the side are for those of you really interested in psychological statistics, because they are survey instruments that other researchers have developed that are reused to collect data in a way that would be replicable by other people. We also had them fill out a weekly survey on well-being with just 5 questions, and had them journal along with their process, so we could get some qualitative data, which turned out to be really useful, because some of the quantitative results, when we looked into the data, I could not make much sense of it. I'm like, why did their mindful attention awareness not increase as much as I was anticipating? They've become way more mindful. Oh yeah, if they are now more aware, then they're also aware of when they zone out. So for some of that survey data, I really needed the journal entries to understand what was going on. Therefore, if you're into surveys, make sure you always get some qualitative answers with that as well. Our main insights in the data analysis from the about 50 finishers that we had in the first 2 rounds were people drop out a lot. You can see we had about 250 signups and about 50 finishers in the first 2 rounds. Doesn't work so well then, huh? Does it? Well, people emailed me. Usually the main reason for dropping out was, I know this would be really healthy for me, but I got too much on my plate right now. I'm too stressed to relax. Okay. I hope you come back in the next round. So we see that it's very easy to put our own health on the back burner when we perceive bushfires burning over here and there, and we don't notice that we're burning ourselves. What we did see in the people who continued and who finished was they were more cheerful and in good spirit. They were more relaxed and calm. We had quite a few participants who often experienced anxiety, a few who experienced depression, and all of them said that their symptoms were a lot less. And we have a general higher well-being. I got all the statistical results for that. I did not squeeze them into the slides, but I'll point you to the reference for it if you're interested in detail. I did have the press pick that up a few weeks ago, and I was really thrilled by that, and I read through all the comments. If you've ever posted anything on social media on a larger scale, you know that reading through the comments may not be the best thing for your mental health, because usually the bad ones stick. And so the one thing that really stuck with me was a couple of the developers answering, you know, I get it. And when I have 15 emails in my inbox saying, urgent deadline, urgent deadline, urgent deadline, and then an email from HR that says, we care about your mental health, then I feel a bit made fun of. So while it is really important for each of us to take care of our mental health, it's also important that we adapt our work culture in that direction. Quick summary of those results. In mindful attention awareness, we did find some support as well as for the well-being and perceived productivity. Now, I'm always really careful about that productivity thing because I don't want any manager to make their developers breathe so that they produce more code. No, 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 no. This is about increased resilience. Maybe a nice side effect is that people wish to stay with their company longer because they feel well treated there. And maybe that decreases sick days. And a nice side effect is increased productivity. We do have higher self-efficacy, which means people feel more confident in solving their challenges, and their daily perceptions were infused with a lot more gratitude and positive reflections towards the second half of the study. Summed up really nicely by one of the participants in the top quote, "Today was the last day of 12 weeks. I took away a whole new world that I'm still trying to reconcile with." We're in the third round right now. Maybe we'll do a fourth one in spring. Hit me up if you're interested. Special thanks goes to a number of people for the first piece of the work. You might recognize the gentleman on the right who was the previous speaker. And to the people on the bottom, there is one very important person missing. To my excuse, I brought her in person, Cristina Martinez Montes, who is sitting there with the nice colorful shawl to the left of the cameraman, was really, really valuable in helping me do the qualitative analysis. If you're interested in further resources around this, I have the article with all the statistics up on archive.org. You can just look for my name there. If that's too much work, you can look at the 60-second TikTok version that I made. It has a few of the qualitative insights. And then for downloading the Sustainability Awareness Framework, you can go to zenodo.org. And I am really curious about your questions.